This is the image of the ambassadors and representatives from European countries riding bamboo bikes for traveling, a very simple but meaningful image, which calls for the public responsibility of preserving the environment and heading to clean atmosphere. This activity is part of the event European Climate Diplomacy Day was held by French Embassy in Vietnam and other European embassies to raise public awareness on climate change and the challenges that the world are facing. Europe Climate Diplomacy Day in Vietnam is also an occasion to introduce the 2015 Global Conference on Climate Change in Paris, COP21, hosted by France. This conference is an opportunity for participating countries to commit to reduce carbon dioxide emissions causing the greenhouse effect, as well as signing a global agreement on climate enable global warming below 2 degrees Celsius.
Vietnam is one of the most exposed country to the climate change. So we expect Vietnam to come to Paris in December with a detailed and ambitious national document. And in this document, in the national documents, each country has to commit itself for the fight against climate change. With very concrete steps, like how much the country intends to reduce the emission, the CO2 emission, for instance.
In recent years, Vietnam made great efforts in responding to environmental issues and climate change, in order to develop a sustainable and low-carbon energy sector in the industrial zones. Besides, Vietnam has always actively participated in international events on climate change and accelerated the operation programs and projects with experienced countries, with the aim of improving efficiency of activities on climate change. In today's program, we will talk to Mr. Remy Genevieve, Director of the French Development Agency in Vietnam. This is the agency that has over 20 years of operating in Vietnam, with more than 79 projects in the field of sustainable energy, infrastructure development, and climate change.
Hello and welcome to Sharing Vietnam on VTC10 Netviet. I'm Ông Nhật. In the program today, we'll have a talk to Mr. Remy Genevieve, Director of French Development Agency in Vietnam, and he will share about the topic of the effectiveness of Vietnam's activities on climate change. Thank you, Mr. Remy Genevieve, for joining our program today. First of all, how do you assess the current situation of Vietnam, one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change?
Well, Vietnam is indeed a potentially heavily affected country, as it has lowlands where paddy is cultivated, and there's also water coming from upstream from the rivers that flow into the deltas. So the delta are lowlands, potentially affected by a rise of sea level, but as well potentially affected by floods coming from the upstream. The typhoons that tend to be more frequent and causing more damages than before. So,
how do you evaluate the effectiveness of Vietnam's activities in coping with climate change recently?
a lot has been done on the institutional level, both in the planning system with the social and economic development plan, and also with the Green Growth Action Plan. I think we have all the ingredients to prepare the country to face the most significant issues of climate disruptions. With concrete investments or concrete adaptation measures, the economy is going to be less carbon intensive in the future.
Can you share about the main programs that AFD, the French Development Agency in Vietnam, have been supporting Vietnam in coping with the climate change?
We have been supporting Vietnam in a variety of programs, both on the adaptation side to help Vietnam cope with the foreseeable effects of climate change, and on the mitigation side, meaning how do we foster the development and the commissioning on infrastructures that are less that are emitting less GES or carbon dioxide. We've committed close to 500 billion euros in the past 10 years directly linked to climate change issues, projects that have climate change favorable impacts.
Recently, the activities on climate change in Vietnam have achieved many positive changes when the Vietnam's national strategy on climate change and the national target program on climate change were implemented. This strategy has received support from many foreign countries in the field of climate change, especially Denmark, with a total ODA of $90 million in the period of 2014 to 2015. Through this cooperation, Vietnam has successfully implemented the construction model and upgrading irrigation systems, enhancing irrigation in two provinces of Quảng Nam and Bến Tre. Besides, the pilot mangrove reforestation was carried out to provide livelihoods for locals while absorbing carbon dioxide to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Denmark was the first country to support the Vietnam climate change program from 2009 with $40 million. We are very active in our cooperation with Vietnam within our strategic partnership within climate change and green growth. We have a lot of activities that is in energy efficiency, renewable energy, mitigation, adaptation in climate change. And we believe that the cooperation is running very well, and it's of mutual benefit.
To help people adapt with the impacts of climate change and enhance disaster risk management, Vietnam also promotes the management and sustainable use of water resources. Some notable achievements are the construction of 255 kilometers of canals and dike system, supplying water to 7.3 million hectares of rice crops and 1.5 million hectares of vegetables. Also, the system supplies 1.7 million hectares of agricultural land. Vietnam has gradually been improving hydroelectric ladder system and has cooperation projects with the Netherlands, which is famous for water management, such as Mekong Delta project. It has been operating since 2013 with the goal of preparing adaptation to climate change for the water companies.
I think Vietnam is going in the right direction in the sense that people are very aware how important it is, how it affects Vietnam. But important thing also, Vietnam is making the right plans. We did the Mekong Delta plan together with Vietnam, and there we look at the future, how the things that we do today affect the future. We have interesting projects like a biogas project where 1 million Vietnamese already use a technique of using the manure of their cattle to produce energy.
Vietnam has started its national strategy on climate change and gained a lot of support from foreign countries. Can you share your opinion about this strategy?
The national strategy of Vietnam is mainly set out in the Green Growth Action Plan, and this strategy has gathered around it in its implementation and its support to the Vietnamese government a lot of donors, either lenders or ODA donors providing subsidies. Common strategy of all the institutions, either multilateral or bilateral, that help Vietnam. One of the pillars is the support program in response to climate change. That was set up 6 years ago, joining initially JICA from Japan and ourselves, AFD, and many other institutions have joined the program ever since, among them the World Bank, bringing significant amounts to help the Vietnamese government to design better public policies.
As part of COP21 conference held in Paris, France, Vietnam is especially related to this conference. So in your opinion, what do you think about the role of Vietnam in participating in this conference?
The role of Vietnam may be very important. You know, all countries, more willing countries participating in COP21 should issue commitments towards contributing to that 2 degrees Celsius maximum rise of temperature level. So from 2010 to 2030, greenhouse gas emissions will be multiplied by 4. This is not sustainable for Vietnam, and this is not sustainable for the world.
Up to now, what are the achievements in terms of the cooperation programs between Vietnam and the AFD, French Development Agency?
We have done a lot. A huge part, of 50% of our commitments are climate change linked. We have financed the 500 kilovolts transmission line from Pleiku to Cao Bang to help provide more electricity produced either in the north or in the neighboring countries and transported to the south, where the energy needs are very important. And on the adaptation side, we have been working on protecting the lowlands, particularly in Ho Chi Minh City and on the Red River Delta as well, from the consequences of flood.
Do you have any suggestions for Vietnam to raise public awareness on climate change, as well as enhancing the effectiveness of the climate change activities in the future?
The awareness of the average citizen in Vietnam is already there. There was a worldwide debate on the 6th of June. One of those debates was held in Vietnam. All of them had a rather good idea of what climate change is and what the dangers of climate change are. I think one of the most important factors for a fast-growing country like Vietnam is price, the energy. This will help the development of cleaner energy. You have to invest in the systems that cause smallest volume of greenhouse gas emissions. You should also trying to develop the new sources of energy. Solar and wind is very important.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy Genevieve, for joining our program today. And that is also the end of our program Sharing Vietnam. For comments and feedbacks, please send it to sharingvietnam@netviet.tv.net. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow.